The stars were quiet but not peaceful. From the ruins of a destroyed alien colony, a small signal kept flashing into the dark. It was weak, almost broken, like a voice crying in the night. Human rescue ships moved through the empty space, searching. For survivors, they did not expect to find anyone alive. But deep inside a shattered dome, they discovered her. She was only a child, small and fragile, with pale silver skin and wide dark eyes. Her clothes were torn, her hands shaking, her breathing heavy with fear. When the humans tried to speak, she only stared at them. Her lips trembled, but no words came. The rescuers could see she was terrified. It was clear she had seen things no child should ever see. The girl did not fight, yet she did not trust. When the rescuers reached out, she pulled back into the shadows. She looked at them as if they were ghosts, or maybe monsters. Still, they lifted her gently and carried her to the ship. Her world was gone, her people gone, and she was the only one left. On Earth, the humans gave her a room, food, and warm clothes. But she did not eat, unless they left the food at her door. She did not speak, not even her own name. She only sat. In the corner, hugging her knees, staring at the wall, the humans decided to call her Lyra. It was a name that sounded soft, like a song, but she never answered when they said it. People whispered about her in the hallways. She may never recover. Some said she is too broken, others added. But Daniel, a young caretaker, did not believe that. He watched her carefully, noticing small things others ignored. When she thought nobody was looking, she cried silently. When a door slammed too loudly, she covered her ears and shook. When footsteps came close, she tried to make herself invisible. It was not anger inside her. It was fear. Deep, endless fear. Daniel felt something stir in his heart. She was not dangerous. She was not strange. She was lonely. She had lost everything. And now she was trapped in a world where nobody spoke her language. She was not only orphaned by war, but also orphaned by silence. Every day, Daniel left a small toy or a flower outside her door. At first, she ignored them. But one evening, when he returned, the flower was gone. She had taken it. It was a small thing, but Daniel's heart lifted. He knew there was a way to reach her. Even if it was slow, the nights were hardest for Lyra. In the dark, memories returned. The fire, the screams, the sound of ships burning her home. She would wake shaking, gasping for air. Sometimes she pressed her face into the pillow so no one would hear her sob. But Daniel heard. He stood outside her door, fists tight, wishing he could take her pain away. Yet he knew if he rushed in, she would only fear him more. In meetings, the doctors said she had severe social anxiety. Her trauma is deep, they explained. She may never adapt to human life. Some even suggested moving her to a distant research facility. But Daniel refused. He spoke with quiet strength. She does not need to be studied. She needs to be loved. Still, days passed, and her silence did not break. Daniel felt helpless. One evening, while walking home, he noticed a small animal shivering near the road. A puppy, thin and weak, abandoned like her. Daniel picked it up and held it close. The puppy licked his hand, tail wagging even in its hunger. And in that moment, Daniel had an idea. Maybe what Lyra needed was not another human voice. Maybe what she needed was a friend who asked for nothing, who judged nothing, who only stayed back at the facility. Daniel kept the puppy hidden in his coat. His heart pounded as he walked toward her door. He knew this was a risk. He knew some would be angry, but he also knew, if anything could reach the lonely orphan, it was this. That night, the hallway was silent. The girl sat in her usual corner, her eyes lost in shadows. She heard footsteps, stiffened and pulled back. Daniel entered slowly, his hands gentle, his voice low. "I have something for you," he whispered. She did not answer, only watched him with cautious eyes. Then, from his coat, he set down the small puppy. Its fur was rough, its body trembling, but its eyes were bright. The little creature wagged its tail and stumbled toward her. Lyra gasped and pressed against the wall, unsure. The puppy stopped, tilted its head, and made a soft sound. For a long moment. The room was still then. Carefully, she reached out one shaking hand. The puppy sniffed her fingers, then licked them. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, a small spark of light appeared in them. It was not a smile. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something new. Something fragile, something hopeful. Daniel watched from the side, his chest tight with emotion. He thought, if this works, maybe she will not be alone anymore. But he also knew this was only the first step. The darkness inside her heart was deep, and even with a puppy by her side, the road to healing would be long. Still, in that quiet room, under the soft glow of a single lamp, the orphaned alien girl touched life again, and Daniel whispered to himself, this is how her story begins. The first night the puppy stayed with Lyra, something shifted. It was not loud, not obvious, but Daniel noticed. The girl no longer kept her eyes only on the walls. Now she looked down at the small creature curled in her lap. Her hand rested gently on its back as if afraid it might vanish. For the first time since her rescue, she was not completely lost in silence. Daniel did not disturb her. He only watched, from the doorway, careful not to break the fragile moment. When the morning light came, he found her still sitting in the corner, the puppy asleep, her head resting on her knees. Her eyes were red, but calmer. It was a beginning, yet the other staff were not happy. You brought an animal into her room? One of them demanded. This is a facility, not a farm, another said. Daniel stood straight and answered softly. She did not cry last night. The room went silent. Nobody could argue with that. Days passed, and Lyra's routine began to change. She still did not eat with others, but now she shared food with the puppy. She broke pieces of bread, holding them out with a trembling hand. The puppy licked her fingers and wagged its tail. Sometimes when she thought nobody was looking, she whispered to it in her alien tongue. Soft, broken words, like little secrets. Daniel heard them once, though he did not understand. Still he smiled, because she was speaking at last. But her fear of people remained. Whenever footsteps echoed in the hall, she froze. If strangers entered, she pulled the puppy close and hid her face. The staff grew frustrated. She trusts the dog, not us, they complained. Daniel answered, that is enough for now. Because he knew trust was not a door that opened quickly. It was a door that creaked slowly with every gentle push. One evening, Daniel decided to try something new. He brought a small ball into her room. The puppy barked excitedly, wagging its tail. Daniel rolled the ball across the floor. The puppy chased it, then turned and pushed it toward Lyra. The girl hesitated, her eyes flicking from Daniel to the ball. Then slowly she pushed it back. The puppy bounded after it, tail wagging wildly. Daniel's heart soared. She had not played with anyone in months. But tonight she played. The game continued, quiet but full of life. The ball rolled. The puppy chased. The girl giggled softly. Daniel froze when he heard that sound. A laugh, light and uncertain, but real. It was like sunlight breaking through clouds. He felt tears sting his eyes, but he quickly blinked them away. He did not want to scare her by showing too much. Still, progress was fragile. One day, another staff member entered too quickly, slamming the door. The loud noise made Lyra scream. She clutched the puppy and curled into the corner, her whole body shaking. The staff member muttered, hopeless, and walked out. But Daniel stayed, kneeling on the floor, his voice steady. You are safe, Lyra. Nobody will hurt you. She did not answer, but her trembling slowed. The puppy pressed against her chest, and finally she calmed. That night Daniel sat alone, troubled. He remembered her eyes, wide, filled with terror. What had she seen on that destroyed colony? What horrors had carved fear so deep inside her? He did not know, but he was certain of one thing: she could not heal alone, and he could not give up. The next morning, he brought her something new. Not food, not toys, but a drawing pad and crayons. He placed them on the floor and stepped back. The puppy sniffed them curiously, then pawed at the paper. Lyra stared, then slowly picked up a crayon. She drew shaky lines at first, then shapes began to appear. Stars, a small home, two tall figures holding a child's hand. Her hand shook as she drew, but she did not stop. Daniel realized with a heavy heart. She was drawing her family, the ones she had lost. When she finished, her eyes filled with tears. She pressed the paper to her chest and turned away. Daniel whispered gently, "They would be proud of you." She looked at him for a moment, her lips trembling, but no words came. Still, that look was more than silence, it was the beginning of trust. The puppy barked softly, tail wagging. It licked her tears, and she let out another small laugh. The sound warmed the cold air of the room. Daniel knew then. The puppy was not just comfort. It was a bridge. A bridge between her broken heart and the world she feared. Every night Daniel visited, always gentle, never rushing. He did not ask her to talk. He did not ask her to explain. He only sat nearby, letting the puppy move between them. Sometimes the girl would glance at him, her eyes softening. Other times she still hid in the corner, but each day the distance grew smaller. The staff still doubted. Why waste so much time on her, they asked. Daniel answered quietly, because she is not just a case, she is a child. And deep inside he promised himself he would not let her fade into silence, not while he was there, not while the puppy wagged its tail and gave her reasons to smile. The lonely orphan was no longer completely alone. She had a friend, and because of that she now had a chance. The puppy was small, but its spirit was strong. It followed Lyra everywhere inside her little room, its paws making soft sounds on the floor. It was not afraid of her silence, not afraid of her trembling. When she hid her face, it climbed into her lap. When she turned away, it nudged her with its nose. The puppy did not care that she was alien, or that she never spoke to the puppy. She was simply hers. Lyra began to feed it from her plate. At first, she only dropped food onto the floor, keeping distance, but the puppy always wagged its tail and ate happily. Soon, she dared to let it lick crumbs from her fingers. That first touch was electric. It made her chest ache, but not in fear. In that simple act, she felt warmth she had not known since her family was lost. Daniel saw the change. Each evening, when he entered with careful steps, he found her different. No longer staring at the wall, but watching the puppy with soft eyes. Her shoulders less tense, her breaths slower. She even moved from her corner. Sitting closer to the middle of the room, it was not much, but to Daniel it was everything. Still, the others did not understand. "She smiles at the animal, but not at us," they said. "Perhaps she will never connect with humans," they whispered. But Daniel shook his head. "The puppy is the key. She will walk through that door when she is ready." One afternoon, something unexpected happened. The puppy barked and ran in circles, then jumped toward the ball Daniel had left. It pushed the ball with its nose, rolling it across the floor. The ball bumped against Lyra's leg. She blinked, confused. The puppy barked again, wagging its tail, waiting. Slowly, she pushed the ball back. The puppy raced after it, sending it back to her. Her lips parted, and for the first time, she let out a quiet laugh, a sound small as a whisper. But Daniel froze in awe. That laugh was brighter than any sunlight. From that day, the puppy became her shadow. When she drew pictures, it pawed at the paper. When she sat in silence, it curled against her. At night, when nightmares shook her awake, it climbed onto her chest, refusing to leave until she calmed. Her hands began to stroke its fur naturally, without fear. Her whispers to it grew longer, softer, almost like songs. The alien girl who had once spoken to no one was now speaking every night. To her puppy. But Daniel noticed something deeper. Sometimes when she thought he wasn't watching, she looked at him, then at the puppy, then back again. It was as if she was testing something, wondering if the kindness of the dog was also in him. Each time their eyes met, she quickly looked away. Yet the silence between them was not the old silence of fear. It was a new silence, fragile, waiting. The staff still argued. "This is not progress," they said. "She hides behind the animal." But Daniel answered firmly, No, she is learning to love again, and love is never small. Then came the turning point. One night, a storm rolled over the city. Thunder roared, shaking the windows. The lights flickered, and the facility darkened. Alarms rang in the distance, and the staff hurried through the halls. In her room, Lyra froze, her body stiff with terror. The storm reminded her of the attack, the fire, the explosions, the end of her colony. She clutched the puppy tight, tears spilling down her cheeks. Daniel rushed to her room, pushing the door open. He found her shaking violently, gasping for air. The puppy barked at him as if begging him to help. Daniel knelt on the floor, speaking softly. "You are safe, Lyra. It is only thunder. Nothing will hurt you." But she shook her head, covering her ears. "No, no," she whispered, her first human word, broken but clear. Daniel's breath caught. She had spoken. It was not to him, not yet. But it was a step across the silence. The storm passed, but the change remained. From then on, she began to form small sounds when alone with the puppy. Daniel would sit quietly outside her door, listening to the gentle voice he could barely understand. She was practicing, testing her voice in safety, and always the puppy listened without judgment. One morning, Daniel entered with breakfast. The puppy ran to him happily, licking his hands. Lyra watched silently, her eyes wide. Then, in a voice almost too soft to hear, she whispered, "Thank you." Daniel froze, hardly believing it. Her accent was strange, her words heavy, but the meaning was clear. He smiled, his heart pounding. "You are welcome, Lyra," he replied. It was the first true bridge between them. Not just through the puppy, but face to face. Daniel knew then that she was beginning to trust. The walls around her heart were cracking. Slowly but surely, the puppy wagged its tail as if proud of them both. And in that moment, Daniel realized, this little creature had done what all their machines, their medicine, and their lessons could not. It had reached the orphaned girl. It had given her a reason to hope. But deep inside, Daniel also knew this was only the beginning. The shadows of her past were still waiting, and one day, she would have to face them. The question was, would her fragile courage be strong enough? When the time came, the bond between Lyra and the puppy grew stronger each day. The little creature followed her like a shadow, sleeping beside her, guarding her dreams. When nightmares came, she no longer cried alone. Soft fur and warm breaths reminded her she was not lost anymore, but humans still frightened her. Even Daniel, though kinder than the rest, felt like a storm waiting outside her fragile world. Still, something inside Lyra had begun to shift. Her whispers to the puppy became longer, her laughter more frequent. Sometimes, when Daniel entered quietly, she did not hide her face. She kept her eyes down, but her body did not shake as before. It was not full trust, not yet, but it was a first step. Daniel noticed every detail. He saw the way she sat closer to the middle of the room instead of the corner. He saw the way her drawings filled with brighter colors, not just black and gray, but green and yellow. He saw how she sometimes hummed softly while stroking the puppy's ears. Each change was small, but together they formed a picture of hope. One evening, Daniel decided to try something different. He entered holding 2 bowls, one of food for the puppy and one of soup for Lyra. Usually, he left her meal near the door and stepped back. But this time he did not leave. He sat on the floor, placing the bowls between them. The puppy barked happily and began to eat. Lyra froze, staring at the second bowl, her eyes flicking nervously toward Daniel. For a moment, Daniel feared she would retreat to the corner again, but the puppy wagged its tail and nudged her hand. Her lips trembled. Then she reached slowly for the spoon. She ate with small bites, never lifting her eyes from the bowl. Daniel said nothing, not wanting to frighten her. He only smiled quietly. For the first time, they shared a meal, not side by side, but together in the same space. It was a fragile moment. But Daniel's heart swelled with pride. From then on, mealtime changed. Sometimes she allowed him to sit near while she ate. Sometimes she even offered crumbs of bread to the puppy while Daniel watched. It was not conversation, but it was connection, and connection was the bridge to trust. But progress was never smooth. One afternoon, a visitor from the Central Council came to observe. He was tall, his boots heavy, his voice deep. When he entered the room, Lyra froze. The memories of raiders flashed in her mind. Tall figures, loud voices, fire everywhere. Her chest tightened, her hands shook violently. The puppy barked and tried to calm her, but she screamed. The visitor frowned. "She is unstable," he muttered. "She will never fit here." Daniel's jaw clenched, but he stayed calm. "She is healing," he answered, "and healing takes time." After the man left, Lyra stayed hidden under her blanket, her whole body trembling. Daniel did not leave her alone. He sat near, speaking softly. "You are safe, Lyra. Nobody will take you away." Hours passed before she peeked out, her eyes wet. The puppy pushed its nose against her cheek, and slowly she reached out, not for the dog, but for Daniel. Her hand touched his sleeve, trembling like a leaf in the wind. Daniel's heart nearly broke. He placed his hand near hers, not touching, only close. She did not pull away. That night, trust had taken its first real breath. The following days brought new surprises. While drawing, she began to push her papers closer to Daniel. Once, she drew 3 figures, herself, the puppy, and another shape with dark hair. Daniel realized it was him. She looked at him shyly. As if afraid of his reaction, he smiled warmly and whispered, "Thank you." Her lips curved in the smallest smile. It was the first time she had given one to a human, but shadows still lingered. Every time loud noises echoed in the building. She flinched. Every time strangers appeared, she curled inward. Daniel knew her wounds were not healed, only covered by fragile hope, and he worried because the world outside was not quiet, not gentle. One day she would have to face it. Would she be ready? The puppy seemed to sense these fears. It often pushed her closer to Daniel, pawing at her until she sat nearer. Sometimes it barked as if urging her to speak. Daniel laughed softly. "Even he wants you to trust me." Lyra looked at him, her lips parting. For a moment it seemed she would speak, but the words stayed locked in her chest. Still she did not look away. That silent gaze was heavier than words. At night, Daniel wrote in his journal, "She is learning to trust step by step," he wrote, "but her scars are deep, and the past is not gone." He closed the book and whispered to himself, "I will not let her face it alone." And in her room, Lyra slept with the puppy curled against her. Her dreams were still haunted, but no longer endless. Somewhere in the dark, a small light glowed. The first steps of trust had been taken. The question now was, where would they lead? Lyra's nights grew quieter, but her dreams did not. Even with the puppy curled against her, the past returned again and again. Flashes of fire, ships burning, voices screaming. Every night she relived the end of her world, and every morning. Her eyes carried shadows too heavy for a child, Daniel noticed. He saw the way she avoided certain sounds, footsteps, alarms, heavy doors. He saw how her drawings, though brighter, sometimes returned to dark colors. One page would show stars and green fields. The next would show fire and black smoke. Her hands shook whenever she drew tall figures, their shape sharp and jagged. He knew she was remembering, but she could not yet tell him. One stormy evening, it happened. The thunder cracked. Lightning split the sky. The puppy barked and jumped into her arms, but Lyra froze. Her eyes went wide, her breaths fast. Daniel rushed to her side, speaking softly. "Lyra, you're safe. It's only the storm." But she shook her head violently, whispering in her alien tongue. The words were broken, filled with panic. Daniel could not understand, yet he felt the weight of them. Suddenly she screamed, a raw, piercing sound that made his chest tighten. Her hands clawed at her ears as if trying to block out the memories. The puppy whimpered, licking her face. And then, between sobs, one word escaped her lips in human language. "Raiders." Daniel froze. The word cut through the air like a knife. So that was it. She had seen raiders, brutal marauders known across the stars. He had read about their attacks, their cruelty. But now he realized she had lived through it. Her whispers became faster, fragments of her alien tongue mixed with broken human words. Fire. Mother. Father. Hide. Her voice trembled, but Daniel listened carefully. He pieced together the story hidden in her pain. Her colony had been peaceful, a quiet place among the stars. Then the raiders came, burning everything. They killed, without mercy, destroying homes. Her parents had hidden her in a storage pod, telling her not to move, through a crack. She had watched them fall, her small body shaking, her hands pressed to her mouth to keep from crying out. Hours passed before the humans arrived, finding only her alive. When Daniel realized this, his heart broke. No wonder she feared voices. No wonder she avoided people. Her first memory of strangers was death and fire. Her trust had been burned away with her home. That night, after the storm faded, Lyra fell asleep with tears still on her face. Daniel sat beside her bed. The puppy curled at her feet. He whispered softly, though she could not hear, "I promise no one will hurt you again." The following days were heavy. She spoke little, but her drawings told the truth. Page after page filled with fire, shadows, and sharp ships in the sky. She pressed the crayons so hard they broke. Her hands trembled, but she did not stop. Daniel sat quietly watching, letting her pour out her pain. It was not words, but it was a story, and it was hers. Still, her fear grew whenever news of raiders reached Earth one evening. Staff whispered that raiders had been sighted in nearby space. The words spread through the halls. Lyra heard them, and her face went pale. She clutched the puppy tightly, shaking, her head, her eyes filled with terror as if they were already at her door. Daniel knelt beside her, speaking firmly. "They cannot hurt you here, Lyra. You're safe." But her voice trembled in reply. "They come. Always come." Her accent was heavy, her words broken, but the meaning was clear. She believed the raiders would find her again. That night she could not sleep. Every sound made her flinch, every shadow made her heart race. The puppy stayed awake with her, resting its head on her lap. Daniel remained outside her room, refusing to leave. He kept watch like a guard, listening for every sound. His own fear grew, not of raiders, but of losing her to her memories. The next morning he brought her outside to the courtyard for the first time. The sun was bright, the air fresh. At first, she refused to step past the door. Her feet froze, her eyes darted in panic, but the puppy barked and ran ahead, rolling in the grass. It looked back at her, wagging its tail as if calling. Slowly, trembling, she stepped onto the grass. Her bare feet touched the earth, her chest rose and fell quickly. But then, she felt the warmth of the sun, the wind on her face. Her eyes softened. If only for a moment. Daniel stood nearby, not too close. "You are free here, Lyra," he said gently. "Out here there is no fire, no raiders." She looked at him, her lips parting. Her voice was soft, almost broken. "They killed all?" Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to say many things, but he only whispered, "You survived and you are not alone now." The puppy barked again, rolling in the grass. Lyra bent down slowly, touching its fur. For the first time, she let the sun warm her face without hiding. The memories were still there, sharp and painful, but so was this moment. Alive, real, different. And Daniel knew. The dark memory had been revealed, but it was not the end. It was the beginning of her fight to live again. The news came quietly at first, whispered in the halls of the facility. A raider ship had been sighted near the edge of Earth's system. Most believed it was only passing through, but the word reached Lyra, and the moment she heard it, her world cracked again. Her hands shook, her breaths came in short gasps. The puppy barked and pressed against her, trying to calm her trembling body. Daniel rushed to her side, kneeling. "You are safe here," he whispered. But she shook her head fiercely, her eyes wide with panic. "They find me," she stammered, her voice broken but clear. Daniel placed a hand over his heart, speaking slowly. "They will not touch you, Lyra. Not while I am here." Still the fear grew. At night she refused to sleep. Every sound outside made her jump. Every shadow looked like danger. The puppy stayed with her, but even its warmth could not erase the terror. Daniel kept watch in the hall. He knew the raiders might never even come close. But for Lyra, they were already here, haunting every breath. Then the alarm came. Late one evening, the facility shook with sudden warning sirens. The staff ran through the corridors, voices tense. A raider scouting vessel had entered near orbit. It was not a full attack, but it was too close. Daniel's heart pounded as he hurried to Lyra's room. She was curled in the corner, holding the puppy so tightly it whimpered. Her eyes were full of tears, her body stiff with terror. Daniel opened the door, his voice calm but firm. "Lyra, listen to me. They are not here to take you. You are safe." But she shook her head, rocking back and forth. "They always come," she whispered again. Daniel wanted to protect her with every part of himself, but he knew words alone would not be enough this time. Suddenly, a shout echoed down the hall. One of the staff had tripped while locking down a section, and the doors jammed. Daniel ran to help, leaving Lyra for only a moment. But the puppy barked loudly, sensing danger. It wriggled free from her arms and bolted after Daniel. "No!" Lyra cried, her voice sharp, her chest twisting. For the first time she moved without thinking. Her fear clashed with something stronger, the thought of losing her only friend. She ran after the puppy, her bare feet slapping against the floor. The corridor was filled with flashing red lights, loud alarms, and rushing humans. Her heart pounded, her vision blurred with fear. But when she saw the puppy barking at Daniel's side, something inside her changed. Daniel was struggling to fix the control panel, his hands covered in sparks. The staff member beside him shouted. In panic, the puppy barked furiously, standing between Daniel and the broken door. Lyra froze at the sight. Daniel was in danger. The same fear that had once paralyzed her now pushed her forward. Her lips trembled, but this time she did not. "Stay silent, don't hurt him," she cried, her voice breaking through the noise. The words rang out clear, raw, and filled with courage. Everyone froze. Daniel, the staff, even Lyra herself. She had spoken not in whispers, not in broken fragments, but in full human words. Loud enough for all to hear, the puppy barked again as if cheering her. Daniel turned to her, his eyes wide. "Lyra," he whispered. She stood trembling, tears streaming down her cheeks. But she did not hide. She had chosen to step into the storm instead of retreating. The staff quickly repaired the door with Daniel's help. The alarms quieted. The danger passed. It had only been a scouting ship, gone as quickly as it came. But for Lyra, the battle had already been fought. Not outside in the sky, but inside her heart. Back in her room, she sat on the bed. The puppy, in her lap, her body was still shaking, but her eyes were different. They no longer held only fear. Now they carried something new. Daniel sat across from her, his voice soft. "You saved me," he said gently. Her lips trembled, and she whispered, "No, puppy saved you." Daniel smiled, tears filling his eyes. "No, Lyra, you did." She looked down, stroking the puppy's fur. Her hand still trembled, but she did not curl into the corner. She stayed on the bed, facing Daniel. That alone was a victory. The staff who had once doubted her whispered among themselves. "She spoke," they said, shocked. "She shouted to protect him." But Daniel only smiled. He had always believed she had courage. She only needed the right moment to find it. That night, for the first time, Lyra whispered more words. Her voice was soft, broken, but steady. "Daniel, stay. Please." Daniel's heart ached with emotion. He nodded, sitting by her side. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised. The puppy curled between them, tail wagging softly even in sleep. Lyra closed her eyes, her breath slow and uneven. She was still afraid, still scarred, but she had taken a step she never thought possible. She had spoken, not for herself, but to protect. And in that moment, she was no longer only the orphaned alien girl. She was someone braver than her fear. The raiders had left, but their shadow remained. Daniel knew they might return one day. But now he also knew. When that day came, Lyra would not face them as a silent child. She would face them as someone learning to be strong. The night after, the raider scare was different. The facility was quiet, the alarms gone, the halls calm, but inside Lyra's room, a storm of another kind was passing. Her heart was still heavy, but for the first time, she had faced her fear. She had spoken out loud, not to cry for help, but to protect. The sound of her own voice still echoed in her mind. It felt strange, fragile but powerful. Daniel stayed beside her through the night. He sat on the floor with his back against the wall, the puppy curled between them. He did not push her to talk. He only stayed. That silent presence was enough. When morning came, she opened her eyes and whispered, "Thank you." Daniel smiled, his chest aching with quiet pride. She was speaking now. Little by little, piece by piece. Days passed, and her courage grew. She still trembled when strangers entered, but she no longer hid under the blanket. She still woke from nightmares, but she no longer faced them alone. Each time the puppy was there, pressing against her, and Daniel was not far. Her world was slowly becoming more than just fear. It was becoming connection. One afternoon, Daniel brought her outside again. This time, she walked without needing to be carried. The puppy raced ahead, tumbling in the grass. Lyra followed with slow steps, her eyes darting nervously. But when the sun touched her skin and the wind brushed her hair, her lips curved in a small smile. Daniel walked behind, giving her space. She turned once, looking at him, and then whispered, "Not alone." The words were soft, but they carried more strength than 1,000 speeches. Daniel's throat tightened. "No, Lyra," he said gently. "You're not alone anymore." The staff began to notice the change. She spoke simple words, now sometimes even full sentences when Daniel was near. She laughed softly when the puppy chased butterflies. She drew pictures of fields, stars, and people standing together. Not just her and the puppy, but her and Daniel. Her pages were no longer only shadows but light. Still, the road was not easy. Her fear returned when strangers came too close. Her hands shook during storms. But each time Daniel reminded her, courage is not the absence of fear. It's choosing to move forward despite it. She listened, repeating the words quietly to the puppy as if practicing. "Move. Forward," she whispered, stroking its fur. One evening, Daniel brought her to the facility's common room. The other children were playing quietly, drawing and building blocks. Lyra froze at the doorway, her body stiff. Her eyes darted to Daniel, fear rising. He knelt down and said softly, "You don't have to join them today, just watch." She nodded slowly, clutching the puppy. Together they sat at the edge, watching the other children laugh and play. For the first time, she saw that not all groups meant danger. Some meant safety, joy, and belonging. The puppy barked and ran toward the children, wagging its tail. They laughed and petted it. Lyra gasped, her hands clutching tightly at her chest. But when she saw the puppy safe, tail wagging, her grip loosened. She whispered to herself, "Safe, safe." Daniel watched her carefully, knowing she was taking another step. Not big, not loud, but important. Weeks turned into months. Her voice grew steadier, her drawings brighter, her laughter easier. She still feared, still struggled, but she was no longer frozen by it. She began to sit closer to Daniel during meals. Sometimes she even reached out her hand, brushing against his as she passed him food. The first time she did it, he nearly cried. It was such a small act, but to him, it was proof of her healing bond. Then one day, a visitor returned, the same council member who had once doubted her. He entered the room, expecting the same silent child. Instead, he found Lyra sitting with Daniel and the puppy, drawing in bright colors. She looked up at him nervously, her body tense, but instead of hiding, she whispered softly, "Hello." The man froze, shocked. Daniel smiled quietly. It was not a loud greeting, but it was enough to silence doubt. That evening, Daniel and Lyra sat together under the fading light. The puppy curled between them, yawning. Lyra whispered, "I live here now." Her voice carried no question, only quiet truth. Daniel placed a hand near hers, not touching, only close. "Yes, Lyra," he said gently. "This is your home." The puppy barked softly, tail wagging as if sealing the promise. Lyra smiled, a real bright smile. And for the first time, Daniel saw not just the orphaned alien girl, he saw a child who had survived, who was healing, and he knew her journey was not over. There would be struggles, fears, and memories still. But she had found something stronger than fear. She had found family. And in that quiet moment, with stars beginning to shine above, Daniel whispered, "You are not just surviving, Lyra. You are living." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not only of sadness, they were of hope. The orphaned alien girl, once lost in silence, now had a voice, a friend, and a bond that nothing could break. The healing had begun, and her story, once written in shadows, was now being written in light.